This is Michael Clara. Welcome to my blog, Local School Boards Can Make a Difference. This is part 2 of School Lunch Fiasco, an incident that occurred here in the Salt Lake City School District last week. And what I want to focus on in this particular podcast is the critical oversight is lacking in the school board. I've received just numerous emails and phone calls, as I'm sure anybody connected with the district has, about this issue. I went to was shopping yesterday at Costco and at the grocery store and was stopped by several people and just had discussions in the aisle about this. This is on everybody's mind. The thing that I'm encouraged about this is that people are actually seeing the connection here. This is a very transparent incident that happened, and people can relate to it, and they're actually connecting it to my past history here on the board, that this is what you're dealing with. They point out, because what's gotten to be more of a topic of discussion is the district's reaction to this, and they really have just fumbled the ball, which is typical of my experience with them over this past year in terms of how the bureaucracy handles issues. But I believe it comes back to the school board, that the school board has rubber stamped what this bureaucracy has been doing for the last 10 years. And, they're not able to handle running a school district. I mean, I don't know, and that's as politely as I can say it. What I want to do is just go over here, how I found out about this. On January 29th, we received, they call them board advisories, and we received updates from Jason Olson, who's a public information officer. And so each of these emails, interestingly enough, I actually learned more about the situation by reading the newspaper than I do getting board advisories from the public information officer. The first article that came out was by the Salt Lake Tribune, and it was titled "Lunches Seized from Kids in Debt at Salt Lake City Elementary." And then that was followed up by the KSL did a story on it, and then it went made all the local news, and then went national and international based on the feedback I've received. What I want to do is just kind of use some critical thinking skills here and just go over the articles that I read and let you know what my thinking is as a school board member, based on my responsibility as an elected official and kind of what I'm looking at when I see this. And this, so obviously this is my perspective. But when I see this article, I'm looking at that they're saying that, and this is the district and the bureaucracy saying that the nutrition manager decided to withhold lunches. So that catches my eye. That's why I have it in red here, and let me see if I can get a laser pointer here. So this gets, my attention, and decided to withhold lunches. The workers then took the lunches. So, and I this is my own color code system. Workers, green just means that it's a local issue, and then orange is more of a district. Red are the things that are standing out to me. These are quotes that I'm getting from the newspaper article. And so I'm just pulling these out of here that stand out in my mind. One of the things that caught my attention was Olson said he would not describe the tactic as a mistake. This was the first article that came out, and I thought at the time, and I think another board member and I exchanged some emails about this, that was just ridiculous. That why not just own this, apologize, and make sure it doesn't happen again? But what this district does, and the bureaucracy does, and the current leadership that's there, and unfortunately the majority of the board support them in circling the wagons and trying to see what they can do to protect their reputation instead of just deal with the issue at hand. And so my point is on these blue ones is that he's talking about something, that it's a tactic, that it's a situation. It's nothing to apologize for at this point. But then based on the public reaction, which is appropriate, and we're a public agency, they had to change their tune, and now they come out with it physically taking lunches away from students was a mistake. The other interesting thing, again, in this blue color, I point out that he's talking about that the district is still investigating whether any policies need to change. Now, in part one of this segment that I'm doing here, this series, there's a radio interview that I did on Saturday, and then there's a radio interview that Heather Bennett did, who's also on the school board. So those would be telling. If you go back and listen to those, you can see the contrast in our approaches to this situation. And again, here now they're saying that the cafeteria manager has been placed on administrative leave, and I'll go more over that later in this podcast. Mikkel is referring to this as switch, that they just switched, and then a parent said that the cafeteria staff were heartbroken when told they had to take the kids' lunches. So it's just interesting, too, to see the different ways that people will describe what happened. So here, another follow-up is the parents fear the district is setting up scapegoats in the lunch fiasco. The district has now suspended 2 employees. One is, and I'll go over those more again, later on in this segment. But I want to kind of concentrate on this blue, that now Jason is calling it the practice promoted by the district. Or actually, I'm sorry, the parents call it that. But then Jason is talking now that it's a decision. And that it's a practice. And if we go back, and just look at these blue ones, which caught my eye, that in the beginning, when we get I'm sorry, I went back too far. When we get the first article from the Tribune, this is referred to as something is not working, and then this is a tactic, and then it's a situation. And then the next article, he's quoted as saying that now we're reviewing our policies to see if they need to change. This is significant to me because that's what my role is as an elected official, to see what is the policy that we have in place and what are we going to change, or was somebody not following the policy is what I'm looking at, or does the policy even exist? And then, here again, he's calling, the parents call it a practice that was promoted by the district. Based on what I've seen so far, that's dead on. They were right. That is correct. Jason says here that this manager decided. So that's telling me, okay, there's not a policy if she decided. And then they're investigating who made the decision. And then now they're investigating the practice. And then now it's turned into an order that one ordered the other to do it. So that's based on that. I sent an email this morning to Jason, and I said, basically, we have a board meeting on Tuesday night. So before the board meeting, I said, I'm looking at the emails that you sent us. And in one of the first emails, he tells us that Kelly Orton said that they did not follow the instructions on how to collect money. So I want a copy of those instructions. I want to see those. Later on that night, on the 29th, he tells us that the district has specific guidelines for kitchen managers on how parents should be notified. So I'm asking, can you please provide me a copy of these guidelines? On January 31st, Olson said that this is in the newspaper, is still investigating whether any policies need to change. So I'm asking, can you please provide me a copy of the policies that he's referring to? Now, based on past practice, they won't give me this information, and I will end up having to submit a GRAMA request in order to get it, if it exists. So I went and looked and found a school board policy. This is the only school board policy I could find on this issue. There might be something else out there. I'm just not finding it. But board policy G3 touches on this, on an umbrella type approach. And then you have what's called, in our district, we have a policy, and then you have the administrative procedures that are written out, designed to implement this policy. And again, I'm not seeing anything as I read these. I don't see anything in there addressing this particular issue from the school board. I did find a department policy, which is interesting. It's still on the webpage as of this morning, and it's under the department policies. When you go under child nutrition is the department, and it has meal charge policy, and it has this memo right here. It doesn't have anybody's name on it. It doesn't have a date on it, but it clearly is outdated, because it says here that each school, I'm right up here, that meals must be paid for in full prior to service. Now, had they followed that, they wouldn't have been in the situation they were in now. But as you read this further, it says money will be collected in the classroom on the first school day of each week and delivered to the kitchen manager 1 hour after the opening bell. The Child Nutrition Department will provide money collection envelopes as needed. The district hasn't been doing this for some time. So parents will be encouraged. So this process, the department policy that they have in place on meal charges is not current. It's out of date. It's on their webpage. So I doubt there's a more current policy in place on the department level. So that goes back to what I said earlier, that I believe that there's just critical oversight lacking, from the school board itself. This is a common source of friction for me over the last year, that the board just rubber stamps. This is the superintendent. This is the business administrator, Janet Roberts. This is Mikkel Withers, who's the superintendent. This is our board president, vice president. Here's the rest of the board. There's 7 of us, and then we have a student member. But the majority of the board just rubber stamps anything these two do. And then when I question or ask questions about issues, then the rest of them will pounce on me, because it's almost like they're a group of bumblebees, and the scent goes out when I ask a question, and they all have to protect these two. It's really a bizarre just social setting. I can't even explain. It's almost like a pack of dogs feels like they got to protect these two, and it's a reversal of roles. And if anybody, people that have observed the happenings of the school board will, support what my analysis is and my conclusion is about how bizarre the rest of these people, the majority of them, I should say. There's a couple that may not always do it, but it seems like everything revolves around these two employees, which is really bizarre again. But in the state of Utah, it's the 7-member board that hires these two employees, yet these two employees seem to run everything, and they're not doing a good job at it. And this incident here is a perfect example of how they operate. So this is the organizational chart of the district. You'll see that the school board, by law, we are tasked with the responsibility of oversight and requiring accountability from people in the district, as we have a budget that's around $250 million. And we set the budget, but again, we've turned over, the majority of the board has allowed these two to run everything. And again, you see what the result of allowing that is. So I've kind of enlarged over here the business administrator. This particular director, Kelly Orton, reports to Steve Wood. Steve Wood reports to Janet Roberts, who's the business administrator. And they have kind of like a relationship. These two, again, are hired by the school board, but these people report to her. And then she is, by design, works under the superintendent, and then in a different angle you look at it, she's kind of doesn't work under him. But in this case, I hold these two responsible for what's happened and for the failure of the breakdown in communication and the lack of procedure or guidelines or policy that's not in place that I can find at this point. This I want to just point out, it's just another way of looking at the chain of command, but I want to point out that when I go to utahrights.com, Janet Roberts is $250,000 a year. You have Steve Woods at $125,000, Kelly Orton at $144,000. I'm assuming that I know he's his boss, but he must make more because he's been with the district longer. And then this is the district field supervisor that was sent out to the local school to take care of the issue at hand, and that might have been the flashpoint. From what I'm gathering, this person was the flashpoint as to what happened. But again, I think I said on the radio, I do concede that this person exercised poor judgment. However, I think we need to balance that out and recognize that her bosses clearly were not giving her the clear directions. Rather, it was in policy, and I believe that we all can see at this point that there really was a practice of doing this. And this incident, with a couple of exceptions, the amount of students that were impacted and removing the lunch, other than that, giving kids that were that had accounts that their parents had not paid, or it looked like their parents had not paid, giving them milk and fruit instead of a lunch, has been a common practice throughout the district, except it got a bit put on steroids in this particular instance. And even now I've heard that even that's happened at a couple of schools, but not to the degree that, or to the level in terms of amount of students at one time. This here is an article that just came out in yesterday's paper. UNA parents, we love the cafeteria lady, blame higher ups. This is right on. This is what I'm saying. I endorse what the conclusion is by the parents. And it's interesting that this is not in my neighborhood, it's in my school district, but I represent a different set of schools. And it's interesting how parents, who I do not know, I've never met them. I have talked to a couple of them on the phone and through email, but it's interesting that they come to this conclusion that I have, and we're on opposite sides of our city, but we can see the same pattern and practice here that's going on in our own district. And I just want to point out here that this is the district field supervisor. This is the school nutrition manager on site at the school. Her compensation is $31,000 a year, and then you have this district person making almost double. Well, she is making more than double what she makes. So, as people have pointed out, that they've created, the district have created a scapegoat and have implicated these two. Unfortunately, these two employees, and I tend to agree with the public sentiment out there that based on the information I'm seeing to date, these aren't the people that should be responsible for this. The responsibility of this, first of all, lies with me as a member of the school board and the rest of the school board, and it also lies with the superintendent, who I don't have him pictured here. But where are these people at? How do they get away with this? And then as clearly this is a public agency, we're a government agency. How do these three and the superintendent and the majority of the board think it's okay to dump all this on these two? Even though this person here, again, was exercising some poor judgment, was following the practice of the district. According to the public information officer, this guy is saying, well, she didn't follow the instructions. All right, well, let me see the instructions. And then, as I pointed out in those color coding of blue at the beginning of this presentation, it's policies, it's instructions, it's guidelines. I'm going to be surprised if I see anything in writing that this person here was supposed to follow, which again allows for that kind of incidents to happen. And I've seen that over and over again. The outstanding question I'm not going to address in this issue or in this podcast, in March of 2013, a memo went out by Kelly Orton, and he said that they're changing the payment system, and that came from this guy right here, who's the director of child nutrition. And many of the parents have talked to me. I've seen it quoted in the paper that why did we leave this system? This PayPAMS is what the district was using, and then this memo is saying that they're now going to go to My Payments Plus. This is part of the problem, that if you read, follow this as I've had to follow it, you'll see that this was also part of the issue. I mentioned that that this particular person here was the flashpoint. I think even before we look at her, we need to go back and look at this decision here that was made by Kelly Orton to switch systems, because several of the parents have told me they were not in arrears. They were not in negative balance, but this system, this new system that this memo says is really great and that we're going to change and go to it. So that's something that we need to explore as to why the district made the decision to go to something that was working, claiming that we're going to go to a better system, and indeed that's not been the case. on part one of this series, I'm on Red Meat Radio, which was yesterday, and I was interviewed by Representative Hughes. And then that was at 8 in the morning, or 9 in the morning, I believe. And then at 10, I think mine was at 8. And then at 10, Heather Bennett was on another radio show. And one of the interesting things that she said that I want to touch on before I leave this here, one of the things that she says is that she's wondering out loud, or, asked a question. She got interrupted, so they didn't follow up on it, as to how did we get to this place? How did we get to a place? And she's kind of implying that, when this started happening, how do adults participate in something like this? And I mentioned, one of the reasons I believe that happened is because, there's no oversight. We don't hold the superintendent accountable. What I want to mention is one of the contributing factors to how something like this can happen, and people in the district, employees, are afraid, which I understand their reluctance to come forward on issues is because of the kind of culture that this superintendent has created throughout the district. They have these monthly meetings. Sometimes they happen twice a month, and they're called General Administrators Meetings. They call them GAM. And at the November one, I had a couple principals call me and say that the superintendent this is a group of principals and other administrators are there, told them that I was saying, relaying incidents or things that were going on to him, and he didn't believe me. And that he didn't believe what I was saying, and he didn't believe that I was actually talking to principals and quoting them accurately. So in the future, if I talk to any principal, he needs to ordered them to call him and to tell him, what the contents of the conversation are. And when I go into the building, he wants to know. So it's this kind of, edict. When he puts those out like that, it causes a chilling effect, throughout the district. And that's just one example. I could give multiple ones, but in the interest of time, that's just an example of what happens. So it's beyond me then, how somebody on the board can question and say, how can adults do this and nobody question it? Well, because you participate in allowing this kind of culture in the district. There's even board meetings that's on public record last year where the vice president and the board president get upset with me for relaying an incident that happened and saying that people shouldn't come to me with complaints. Even though I hear that people go to them and they quote people, and that seems to be okay, but when people come to me, then he puts out an edict that he doesn't believe what I'm saying. So that engenders a lot of good leadership on the top when this guy is the employee telling his employees that he doesn't believe his employer, which is me, a member of the board. But on one of the things I want to point out is the Utah Code 667-213 is titled Reporting of Governmental Waste or Violation of Law. And it states that, that if you work for a government agency in the state of Utah, that you can report any type of waste, misuse of public funds, property, or manpower, or anything that you suspect is a violation of law. You can report that and should, by law, to a member of the governing body of the political subdivision, which is me. It also says that an employer may not implement rules or policy that unnecessarily restrict an employee's ability to document the waste or misuse of public funds, property, or manpower, a violation or suspected violation of any law, rule, regulation, or as it relates to the state government or state government here, but it says any other political subdivision, employer, gross mismanagement, abuse, or authority, or unethical conduct. So here we have a state law that says you can't implement things that are going to impede that, but he does it all the time. And he tries to run this, I'm not going to go into all that, but it's just, the culture is here in our school district because of the lack of vision that this superintendent has given and the kind of culture that he has perpetuated. It allows something like this to happen. Even if people are upset and recognize that it's wrong, they still have to abide by it because they'll lose their job. And we have multiple examples that are very public where teachers have spoken out on issues and then they get transferred or they get put in a situation that's unbearable and they just quit. And I've talked to them. They have come to me. I would have no way of seeking them out, so they have sought me out, and I have confirmed, their situations. And there's a pattern and practice here of doing that. So we can't be surprised when stuff like this happens. And clearly, the way they handle it, that's for all to see also. I want to just end this podcast with something that I read on Facebook last night, or I think early this morning, about 6 a.m. But it was from Sim Gill, who is the district attorney for Salt Lake County. He says, "Asleep at the wheel." Is the title of this. He says, and he quotes a couple of the articles or a couple of the quotes from the Salt Lake Tribune, and he says, while the district, this is from the Salt Lake Tribune on the 30th, quote, "While the district initially said the decision to take lunches was made by a district-level child nutrition manager, spokesman Jason Olson now says that is under investigation." Then there's another Tribune quote here. "The district placed the school employee and her district-level supervisor on paid leave last week as the incident began to dominate headlines and sparked an ugly backlash. But parents are now concerned district leaders could be punishing the wrong people and protecting policymakers at the top." And I, again, cannot agree with that more. That they are right on. They're spot on. Here's what Sim Gill, a commentary on Facebook, was about these two quotes that he put up. He says, "Like a driver who falls asleep at the wheel for a second, when they wake up to the danger, they overcorrect, reacting to the heightened awareness of the crisis. Sometimes the overcorrection in this manic mode ends up causing the accident. The now infamous incident of taking and throwing food away from kids in Uinta Elementary has raised questions about the decision to do this to children and the means by which to effectively communicate with the parents. Everyone can agree that there was a better way to handle this. Now, however, the scrutiny of this issue has resulted in one error building upon another. So now, a lunch lady, the cafeteria manager, not the one who came up with the policy, not the person or administrative or district level nutrition manager, but the line school worker is put on administrative leave. The poor woman who was in tears as she witnessed and had to implement this decision is put on leave. The person who neither authored nor is empowered to speak up to the policy articulated is put on leave. The one person who has to deal with these children on a daily basis is put on leave. Was everyone related to this incident put on leave, or just the lunch lady? A slight overcorrection on the highway of poor decisions. Yes, there has been a reaction by people not only in this state, but from the rest of the country. It was an unfortunate incident, an error in judgment, poor mishandling of policy, and now an average line worker put on administrative leave. Not the author of the policy, nor the author of the decision, but the end of such actions. The community is watching for the truth of such decisions, not the rationalizations. The district investigates while the cafeteria manager is put on leave. Accountability, proportionality, truth. And his last statement is, integrity lies in truth, transparency, not in the compounding of errors, in the overcorrections while asleep at the wheel, heading for the ditch of failing policies. Wow, that's powerful, and I appreciate his wisdom in articulating that, because that's just spot on again, and it's in line with what the parents are seeing. It's in line with what I have been saying this last year. Sometimes I think, I have taken the risk of looking like a crazy person over the last year trying to address these types of issues. And then the reaction to it is just a cover-up. And for the most part, they get away with it. But here, there's just the stars are aligning, and there's just a set of circumstances that the foolishness that as under which this school district has been operating is now being exposed, and there's really no place for them to go once the spotlight is on them to the degree that it's happening now. So I believe that, this is part of government. It's a public school. We need to put the public back into public schools, and we need to take control of our schools, and especially here in Salt Lake City, and start correcting. This is one error that is making the headlines, but I would submit that we also collectively, because of the poor choices that you see demonstrated here are being made. This is why you have a 48% dropout rate of Hispanic students, and this is why there's an indifference to that. This is why we can, they can get away with blaming this on a lunch lady, and I don't think they're going to get away with it this time. But stuff like this has happened in the past, and they've gotten away with it, and my hat is off to those parents in that community that have moved this forward. My hat is off to, I know the city councilman over there is questioning some of the issues. Other elected officials have stepped in, and truly they have stepped in and unfortunately have had to do, where's the school board on this? Why isn't the school board, instead of trying to protect, the institution and the bureaucracy that's just gone amok? Fortunately we have the wisdom of people like District Attorney Sim Gill, who's willing to speak up on this, and I thank him for that, publicly. And again, the parents, I can't say enough. I know that I've been in their shoes. I will probably still be in their shoes when you speak up on an issue and you get ignored. This is why they ended up going to the media, because they were ignored on several levels of the bureaucracy. So anyways, that's the end of this particular podcast on this one, and I'll look for part 3 and part 4 as this continues to unfold. Thank you.